Most people imagine the world before the flood as a primitive version of our own. Mud huts, campfires, humanity crawling on all fours. The Bible tells a completely different story. Cities, metallurgy, music, advanced agriculture. A civilization so developed that God decided to erase it from the face of the earth, and almost no trace survived to tell the tale. The record is in Genesis, chapters 4 and 5. Few verses, but when you read carefully, you realize that those paragraphs compress more than 1,600 years of human history, 16 centuries. To put it in perspective, that is more time than separates the fall of the Roman Empire from today. More time than separates the Crusades from the 21st century. Entire generations were born, lived, built, died. Empires rose and fell. Entire dynasties flourished and disappeared, and everything was swept away under the waters without leaving a single monument standing. The first detail that catches attention is the longevity. Adam lived 930 years. Seth lived 912. Enoch lived 905. Kenan reached 910. Mahalalel reached 895. Jared impresses with 962 years, and Methuselah, the oldest man recorded in the entire Bible, reached 969 years. These were not decades. They were almost millennia of individual life. Think about what this means in terms of knowledge accumulation. A single man had enough time to master dozens of trades. He could spend 100 years learning carpentry, another 100 perfecting metallurgy, another 100 studying astronomy, another 100 developing agricultural techniques. And he would still have centuries ahead to teach all of this to his children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren. The transmission of knowledge did not depend on books or schools. It depended on men who lived long enough to accumulate and personally transmit centuries of experience. And even more impressive, the generations overlapped. Adam was still alive when Lamech, Noah's father, was born. The first man created by God coexisted with the grandfather of the one who would build the ark. Imagine Adam, over 800 years old, sitting down with his descendants of the 9th generation and telling them directly what the Garden of Eden was like. What God's voice sounded like walking in the garden in the cool of the day. What the moment was like when he realized he was naked. What the weight of the curse being pronounced felt like. This was not history passed from mouth to mouth through dozens of intermediaries. This was direct testimony from one who lived it to those who could still hear. This overlap of generations created a network of knowledge impossible to replicate today. When Adam died, Seth already had 800 years of experience. When Seth died, Enoch had centuries of living with both of them. Knowledge was not lost, it accumulated, it multiplied. Each generation built on increasingly solid foundations of wisdom, transmitted directly by those who developed it. And these were not vegetative lives. Genesis chapter 4 makes clear they were actively building. Cain, after killing Abel and being marked by God, departed and founded a city. The text is direct. Genesis chapter 4, verse 17. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. Cain built a city and named it after his son, Enoch. Not a village, not a temporary camp, a city. The Hebrew term used, Iyar, denotes organized urban structure, permanent constructions, significant population concentration. This happened in the first generation after Adam. Humanity did not wait millennia to urbanize. It did not spend ages living in caves before discovering architecture. It began immediately. The first son of Adam who survived was already building cities. The capability was there from the beginning. The knowledge was implanted by God in the first man and transmitted instantly to the first generation. But Cain's lineage did not stop at constructions. The text of Genesis chapter 4, verses 20 to 22, reveals 3 characters who completely transformed that civilization. Jabal, Jubal, and Tubal-Cain, Three brothers, three revolutions, three pillars of a society that would rival any civilization we know. Jabal was the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. That simple phrase hides a complete economic revolution. Organized livestock means animal domestication, species selection, controlled breeding, large-scale herd management, development of specific breeds for meat, milk, leather, wool, a herding system that requires knowledge of seasonal cycles, water sources, migration routes, and dwell in tents indicates structured nomadism. It was not aimless wandering, it was planned movement, following the herds, taking advantage of different pastures at different times. Mobile infrastructure that could be assembled and disassembled quickly. Tents that needed to be resistant enough to protect against bad weather, but light enough to be transported. Advanced textile technology to produce the fabrics. Wood or metal structures to support the coverings. Jabal did not simply invent animal husbandry. He invented a way of life, an economy, a culture, a system that exists to this day in various parts of the world, thousands of years later, practically unchanged in its basic principles. Jubal was the father of all those who play the harp and flute, complex musical instruments, not primitive noises or rhythmic beating on hollow logs. Harp, flute, instruments that require sophisticated engineering to be built. A functional harp requires strings of different lengths, tensioned to specific degrees to produce distinct notes. It requires a soundboard that amplifies the sound without distorting it. It requires knowledge of acoustics, of mathematical proportions between sound frequencies. The Greeks, thousands of years later, would become famous for discovering the mathematical relationships between string lengths and musical tones. Cain's descendants were already applying these principles before the flood. A flute requires a hollow tube perforated with millimetric precision. Each hole determines a note. The position, size, and angle of each perforation affects the sound produced. Building a tuned flute requires experimentation, refinement, knowledge that only develops through generations of musicians testing, adjusting, perfecting. And if Jubal was the father of all those who play these instruments, it means he did not merely invent. He taught. He formed disciples. He created tradition. He established schools of music, probably. He developed notation of some kind, perhaps. He composed. He performed. He transmitted his knowledge to later generations who continued developing the art. We are talking about a civilization with sophisticated musical culture, concerts, compositions, varied instruments, music theory, all of this flourishing before the flood, before the pyramids of Egypt, before Stonehenge, before any civilization that modern archaeology recognizes. And then comes Tubal-Cain. Verse 22 says he was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. Bronze and iron. Two metallurgical revolutions in a single phrase. Bronze is a metal alloy. It does not occur naturally. You need to combine copper with tin in specific proportions, generally about 12% tin to 88% copper, to obtain quality bronze. This requires first discovering and mining copper, then discovering and mining tin, which is much rarer, then developing furnaces capable of reaching temperatures above 1,000 degrees to melt the copper, then learning to add the tin in the right amount, at the right time, in the right way, then molding the liquid metal into useful shapes before it cools. Each stage of this process took centuries to develop in later civilizations. The Sumerians are credited with the first bronze work around 3,300 years before Christ. But Tubal-Cain was doing this at least 1,000 years before the flood, and probably much longer. And the text does not mention only bronze, it mentions iron. Iron is even more challenging. The melting point of pure iron is 1,538 degrees Celsius, almost 500 degrees above what is needed for bronze. Primitive furnaces do not easily reach that temperature. Specialized construction is required, precise ventilation control, high-quality fuel burning for hours. Later civilizations took centuries to make the transition from bronze to iron. The so-called Iron Age began around 1,200 years before Christ in the Near East. Before that, iron was so rare it was used mainly for jewelry and ceremonial objects. But Tubal-Cain, before the flood, was already producing cutting instruments of iron, functional tools, practical weapons, agricultural implements that would revolutionize work in the field. And the text says he was the forger of all cutting instruments. All, not some, not a few specialized types, every imaginable variety, axes to cut trees, saws to process wood, hoes and plows for agriculture, sickles for harvest, knives for domestic use, swords and spears for war, chisels for sculpture, drills for perforation, a complete and diversified metallurgical industry. Now multiply that knowledge by the time available and by people's longevity. Tubal-Cain was born in the 7th generation from Adam. There were still hundreds of years until the flood. Hundreds of years for that technology to be perfected, expanded, combined with other discoveries. If in just a few generations they already had cities, organized livestock, sophisticated music, and bronze and iron metallurgy, what did they develop in the following centuries? The biblical text does not detail, but it offers indirect clues that allow reasonable inferences. Shipbuilding, for example. Noah built an ark 137 meters long. The instructions came from God, but the execution was human. Noah needed to cut gigantic trees, process the wood, shape the pieces, fit the structure, seal with pitch. He needed tools, he needed techniques, he needed knowledge that did not come from nowhere. The ark was not humanity's first great construction project. Cain's cities came before. Centuries of architectural development preceded Noah. When he received the divine instructions, a tradition of large-scale construction already existed. Engineers, architects, master carpenters accumulated knowledge that Noah could access, even if he was the only righteous person in his generation. And there is another element that complicates the picture even more. Genesis chapter 6 mentions that the earth was corrupt and filled with violence. The Hebrew term for violence, chamas, denotes not just physical aggression but systematic injustice, structured oppression, organized wickedness, violence on a scale sufficient for God to decide to destroy everything. This suggests organized conflicts, armies, wars, and wars in societies with advanced metallurgy mean sophisticated weapons, bronze and iron swords, spear points, breastplates, helmets, shields, war chariots possibly, military fortifications, siege and defense tactics, generals commanding troops, kings disputing territories, a warlike civilization with destructive capacity that only metallurgy allows. The same chapter 6 of Genesis mentions the Nephilim. Verses 1 to 4 describe an extraordinary situation. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took wives for themselves from all they chose. The exact identity of these sons of God has been debated for millennia. Some interpretations suggest fallen angels. Others suggest descendants of Seth marrying descendants of Cain. The text does not resolve the ambiguity, but the result is clear. The children born from this union were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Hebrew word Nephilim comes from a root meaning to fall or to overthrow. In Numbers chapter 13, when the Israelite spies described the inhabitants of Canaan, they used the same word to describe giants who made the spies look like grasshoppers in comparison. Beings of extraordinary stature, immense strength, fame that crossed generations. Men of renown means they were known, celebrated, probably feared. War heroes, combat champions, tyrants who dominated through physical power. The antediluvian world had its celebrities, and given the context of widespread violence, they were not celebrities for charity or wisdom. They were famous for destruction. And there is another element that few consider when thinking about the pre-flood world. The geography was different. Genesis chapter 2 describes the Garden of Eden being irrigated by a river that flowed out of Eden and divided into 4 branches. Pishon, which flowed around the land of Havilah, where there was gold. Gihon, which flowed around the land of Cush. Tigris, which flowed east of Assyria, and Euphrates. 2 of these rivers exist today. Tigris and Euphrates run through modern Iraq, but Pishon and Gihon have completely disappeared. Some scholars try to identify them with current rivers. Pishon would be the Ganges, or perhaps a now dry river in Arabia. Gihon would be the Nile. But these identifications are speculative. The pre-flood geographical configuration was so different that any comparison with current geography is problematic. The flood described in Genesis was not simply heavy rain for 40 days. The text speaks of the fountains of the great deep being broken up. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on that same day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Fountains of the great deep, water coming from beneath the earth, not just from above, immense underground reservoirs being violently released, cataclysmic geological events that could have altered continents, created oceans, completely reorganized the planet's surface. Geologists who work within a creationist paradigm suggest that tectonic plates may have moved rapidly during the flood. Continents that today are separated by oceans would have been connected before. The movement of the plates would have generated intense volcanism, constant earthquakes, tsunamis of unimaginable proportions. The floor of current oceans would have been forming in real time, while the previous surface was being destroyed and buried. If this is true, looking for traces of antediluvian civilization on the current surface is useless. Everything would be buried under kilometers of sediment, crushed under unimaginable tectonic pressures, dissolved in the depths of oceans that did not exist before the flood. Cain's cities, Tubal-Cain's forges, Jubal's instruments, all transformed into rock, incorporated into the geological layers that conventional science dates at millions of years. But let us return to the people who inhabited that lost world. The lineage of Seth, Adam's 3rd son, is recorded in Genesis chapter 5, a genealogy that goes from Adam to Noah, 10 generations, and each entry follows the same pattern. So-and-so lived so many years and fathered a son. Then he lived so many more years, had other sons and daughters, and died. The formula repeats 9 times, and then there is an exception that completely breaks the pattern: Enoch. Genesis chapter 5 verses 21 to 24. Enoch lived 65 years and fathered Methuselah. Enoch walked with God 300 years after he fathered Methuselah and had sons and daughters. All the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. He did not die, he was taken. While all other records end with the phrase, "and he died," Enoch's ends with "God took him." In a world where everyone died, even if after 900 years, one man simply disappeared because he walked with God. Twice the text repeats that Enoch walked with God. Not just believed, not just obeyed, walked. Intimate communion, constant relationship, continuous presence. In the midst of a corrupt, violent civilization, far from the Creator, one man maintained such deep intimacy with God that he was transplanted directly to eternity without passing through death. The letter to the Hebrews, in the New Testament, chapter 11, verse 5, confirms, "By faith Enoch was translated so that he should not see death, and was not found, because God had translated him." Before his translation, he had this testimony, that he pleased God. This indicates that spirituality in the antediluvian world was not uniform. There was widespread corruption, yes, but there were exceptions. There were people who sought relationship with the Creator, even though surrounded by a civilization heading toward total judgment. Seth's lineage preserved something that Cain's lineage lost: connection with God, memory of the origin, hope of redemption. And Enoch left descendants before being taken. His son Methuselah lived longer than any other recorded human being, 969 years. And there is a mathematical irony here that scholars have noted for centuries. If you add up the ages at the time each patriarch fathered his son, from Adam to Noah, and consider that the flood came when Noah was 600 years old, Methuselah died exactly in the year of the flood. The name Methuselah in Hebrew can be interpreted as when he dies, it will come, or his death will bring. Prophecy in the very name. The oldest man in history, carrying from birth the announcement of the judgment that would come when he departed. Jewish tradition, preserved in ancient texts, suggests that Methuselah died 7 days before the waters arrived. Genesis chapter 7 verse 4 records God telling Noah to wait 7 days before the flood began. Some rabbis interpret this 7-day period as mourning for Methuselah's death, the last act of divine mercy before the judgment, time to mourn the righteous man before destruction came. Lamech, son of Methuselah and father of Noah, gave his son a name laden with hope. Noah means rest or comfort. Genesis chapter 5 verse 29 records Lamech's prophetic words. This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed. The ground had been cursed in Genesis chapter 3 because of Adam's sin. Thorns and thistles it would produce. By the sweat of his face, man would eat his bread. Working the land was arduous, painful, frustrating. And somehow Lamech intuited that his son would bring change. He did not know exactly how. He did not have complete revelation of the flood that would come. But he felt the child was special, that through him something new would begin. Noah grew up in that world, a world of cities, of metallurgy, of music, of extreme longevity, a world where giants walked, where violence dominated, where human wickedness was so intense that God regretted having created humanity. Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 describes the situation in absolute terms. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Not occasionally evil, not frequently evil, continually evil. Every thought, every intention, every plan, every desire, pure, uninterrupted universal wickedness, an entire civilization rotten to the core. And verse 6 adds the emotional dimension. And the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. The creator of the universe feeling pain, regret, weight in his heart. Not cold, distant anger, deep sadness. Grief for what could have been and was not. Rejected love overflowing into sorrow. And yet in the midst of that total darkness, a light, Genesis chapter 6, verse 8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Noah found grace. He did not deserve it. He did not earn it. He found it. Grace is unmerited favor. On a planet possibly with billions of people, considering the longevity and reproduction rates, one man was found by God, chosen, set apart, destined to carry humanity's future through the waters. Genesis chapter 6 verse 9 says that Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. The Hebrew term for perfect, tamim, means complete, without defect, whole. Not perfect in the sense of sinless, but whole, consistent. A complete man in a civilization fragmented by wickedness. And the following phrase completes the picture. Noah walked with God. The same description used for Enoch. Walked with God. Communion, intimacy, walking together. In the midst of chaos, violence, total corruption, Noah maintained relationship with the Creator. He heard his voice. He followed his instructions. He remained faithful when all the rest of the world had abandoned faith. God gave Noah specific instructions. Build an ark. Genesis chapter 6, verses 14 to 16, details the specifications. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above. Set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. 300 cubits long, 137 meters, 50 cubits wide, 23 meters, 30 cubits high, 14 meters, 3 decks, 1 side door, 1 opening for light and ventilation at the top. Pitch waterproofing inside and out. The measurements were precise, and modern naval engineers who have analyzed these proportions confirm they are ideal for stability in rough seas. The 6-to-1 ratio between length and width is used to this day in cargo ships designed for maximum stability, not speed. The ark did not need to navigate in a specific direction. It needed to float without capsizing, while gigantic waves tossed it from all sides, and the divine proportions guaranteed exactly that. Noah had no experience in shipbuilding. There probably were no oceans in the antediluvian world as we know them today. Genesis chapter 2, verse 6 mentions that a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Some scholars interpret this as a completely different climate system, based on mist and underground springs, not on evaporation and rain cycles as today. If this is true, the very idea of a global flood would be incomprehensible to Noah's contemporaries. A man building a giant boat in the middle of dry land to save himself from water falling from the sky. Madness. It could only be madness. And Noah obeyed. Genesis chapter 6, verse 22 says simply, "Thus Noah did. According to all that God commanded him, so he did." It does not record discussions. It does not record objections. It does not record negotiations or requests for clarification. God commanded. Noah did. The construction probably took decades. Scholars estimate between 50 and 75 years, based on the ages of Noah's sons and the time they are mentioned as already having wives when they entered the ark. Decades waking up every day, picking up tools, working on the structure that would save his family, while neighbors watched, while passers-by mocked, while no one believed. The antediluvian world had technology to facilitate the work. Advanced metallurgy meant Noah probably used bronze or iron tools, not chipped stones, sharp axes to fell trees, efficient saws to process logs, precise chisels to work joints, planes to smooth surfaces. All the knowledge accumulated by generations of craftsmen was available, but the work was still brutal. Trees the size of buildings needed to be felled, cypresses or gophers, as the Hebrew text calls them, growing for centuries, trunks too thick for one man to embrace. Felling one of those trees with a manual axe took days of continuous work. Then, the log needed to be moved to the construction site, tons of wood being dragged by men and possibly oxen or other draft animals. Wooden rollers under the main trunk, ropes pulling, muscles burning. Slowly, meter by meter, each tree arriving at the construction site. Then came the processing, logs being sawn into planks, slow, exhausting process. 2 men operating a long saw, one on top of the log, another below in a ditch, pulling alternately while sawdust fell into the eyes of the one below. Each plank taking hours to cut, each plank needing to dry for months before it could be used, or it would crack after installation. Then the assembly. The keel first, the spine of the vessel, giant beams being fitted together, ribs rising from the sides, curved under steam and fire to form the hull, planks being nailed or fitted to the ribs. each nail probably bronze or iron, handcrafted, thousands of nails, thousands of joints, years of work, and finally the waterproofing. Pitch being applied inside and out, every centimeter of surface covered, every joint sealed, every potential leak prevented. The ark needed to be absolutely watertight. A single forgotten hole, a single poorly sealed joint, and all would be lost. And while Noah built, the world continued its routine of wickedness. Genesis does not describe what was happening around him during those decades. But Jesus, in Matthew chapter 24, offers a retrospective glimpse, verses 37 to 39. For as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came and took them all away, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Normal life, parties, weddings, celebrations, commerce, constructions, births, natural deaths. No one paying attention to the strange man building a giant boat far from any water. No one taking his warning seriously. No one interrupting their routine to consider that judgment might be coming. Peter, in his second letter, chapter 2, verse 5, calls Noah a preacher of righteousness. This indicates that Noah did not merely build in silence. He preached. He warned. He called to repentance. For decades, probably. Every hammer blow on the ark was a sermon. Every installed plank was an invitation. Every layer of pitch was a visual warning that water would come, and no one listened. No one outside his immediate family entered the ark when the doors opened. The ark was not just a boat. It was judgment in the form of wood. Its very existence condemned the unbelief around it. And every person who passed by, looked, shrugged, and went on with their life was choosing their fate. When the construction finally finished, God commanded Noah to enter. Genesis chapter 7 details the order. And with Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and his sons' wives, 8 people. Of the entire population of the antediluvian world, 8 people were considered worthy of salvation. 8 among possibly billions, and along with the people, animals of each unclean species, a pair, of each clean species, 7 pairs, birds, reptiles, mammals, creatures of all sizes entering the ark in orderly fashion. The text says they came to Noah, not that Noah went to get them. God was directing, supernatural instinct guiding each species to the door of salvation. Genesis chapter 7 verse 16 records the definitive moment, and those that entered, male and female of all flesh, went in as God had commanded him. And the Lord shut him in. It was not Noah who sealed the ark from outside, it was God. Judgment was decreed, mercy was complete. Whoever was inside was saved, whoever was outside was condemned. And the door closed by divine hands could not be opened by human hands. And then the waters came. Genesis chapter 7 describes 2 simultaneous phenomena. The fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Water coming from below and above at the same time. Total cataclysm. The fountains of the deep suggest massive geological events, underground aquifers being ruptured, fissures in the Earth's crust releasing unimaginable amounts of water stored under pressure, associated volcanism probably. Magma heating underground water and converting it to steam that exploded through the surface. Global-scale earthquakes, the planet literally tearing itself apart. And from above, rain. But not rain as we know it. The text says it rained 40 days and 40 nights without stopping. If the antediluvian world really had a different climate system based on constant humidity without precipitation, that may have been the first true rain in history. The firmament collapsing, all atmospheric moisture plummeting at once, the waters rose. The text says they covered the highest mountains by 15 cubits, approximately 7 meters above the highest peak. The entire world submerged. There was nowhere to flee. No mountain was high enough. There was no boat besides the ark. Everything was covered. Genesis chapter 7, verses 21 to 23 describes the extinction, and all flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life. All that was on the dry land died. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping thing and bird of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive. Total extinction. There were no survivors outside the ark. The oldest civilization of humanity, with its cities, its metallurgy, its music, its famous giants, its organized violence, all sank beneath the waters of judgment. 1,656 years of human history erased in 40 days. And there, inside the ark, floating above kilometers of water, 8 people carried all that remained. Tubal-Cain's knowledge of metallurgy, preserved in the memory of those who learned. The musical tradition started by Jubal, kept by those who knew how to play. Jabal's agricultural techniques, maintained by those who raised animals. The memory of Enoch, the man who walked with God and was taken, transmitted from generation to generation. The stories of Adam himself, told by men who lived for centuries and overlapped generationally. All of this compressed in 8 minds, floating in the silence of a dead world. The waters prevailed on the earth for 150 days, 5 months of global ocean. No land visible in any direction, no point of reference, just water as far as the eyes could see, sky and sea meeting in every direction, and below, in the depths, the remains of everything that existed, cities sinking into sediments, forges extinguished forever, musical instruments silenced, bodies of billions decomposing in the darkness. When the waters began to recede, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. Noah waited patiently. He sent out a raven that kept flying back and forth until the waters dried up. He sent out a dove that found no place to land and returned to him. He waited 7 more days. He sent out the dove again. It returned with an olive leaf in its beak. Plant life sprouting somewhere. Hope renewed. He waited 7 more days. He sent out the dove a 3rd time. It did not return. It had found a place to live. Noah waited for God's command to leave. Even with the land apparently dry, he did not presume. Even after a year and 10 days inside the ark, he did not take his own initiative. He waited until God explicitly told him to leave. And when he left, the first thing he did was build an altar and offer sacrifice. Clean animals burned in worship, gratitude overflowing, recognition that survival was not his own merit, but divine grace. And God responded. Genesis chapter 8, verses 21 and 22. The Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. Promise of preservation, guaranteed cycles, stability, never again a global flood. Not because humanity would improve. The text is brutally honest. The imagination of man's heart remains evil from his youth. God knows that. He knows human nature better than we know ourselves. Even so, he promised mercy. The rainbow was established as a sign of this covenant. Every time rain and sun combine in the sky, the promise is visually renewed. God looks at the bow and remembers the covenant. Humanity looks at the bow and should remember as well. There will be no other flood. Not in that way, not by water. Noah planted a vineyard. Civilization restarted. His 3 sons spread out, populated continents, founded nations. Shem, ancestor of the Semitic peoples, including the Hebrews who would preserve God's revelation. Ham, ancestor of African and Canaanite peoples. Japheth, ancestor of European and Asian peoples. From 3 men, all of current humanity descends. Genetically, we are all cousins, children of the same survivor, grandchildren of the world that perished in the waters. Antediluvian knowledge did not completely disappear. Metallurgy resurfaced quickly after the flood, organized agriculture as well. Large-scale construction appeared just a few generations later, as demonstrated by the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. The musical tradition continued, crossed centuries, millennia reached us. Something was transmitted through the waters, memory, skill, technique, but the scale was drastically reduced. Men no longer lived 900 years. Longevity plummeted rapidly after the flood. Shem lived 600 years, Arphaxad 438, Salah 433, Eber 464, Peleg dropped to 239, Ru 239, Serug 230, Nahor 148, Terah 205, Abraham 175, Isaac 180, Jacob 147, Joseph 110, Moses 120, David 70, each generation living less. The environment had changed. Atmospheric protection was different, possibly. Genetics were degrading, diet was different. The post-flood world was fundamentally different, and human bodies reflected that difference. The time to accumulate knowledge decreased. The overlap of generations that allowed direct transmission of wisdom was drastically reduced. Humanity restarted at a disadvantage. What exactly existed before the flood remains largely mysterious. Genesis offers fragments, names, inventions, general characteristics, but it does not offer maps. It does not describe architectural plans. It does not detail specific technologies. The record is purposely sparse, sufficient to know there was an advanced civilization, insufficient to reconstruct it in detail. Some search for physical traces to this day. Anomalous underwater structures are periodically reported in various parts of the world. Geological formations that seem too artificial to be natural. Artifacts found in sedimentary layers where they should not exist, according to conventional chronology. Established science generally dismisses or reinterprets these discoveries. The controversy continues in specialized circles. Archaeologists spend entire careers trying to reconstruct civilizations that left pyramids, temples, libraries, and monuments. The antediluvian world left nothing accessible. 1,656 years of human history compressed into a few verses of a single book. What we know is fragmentary, but significant. Cities existed before the flood. Advanced bronze and iron metallurgy existed. Sophisticated music with complex instruments existed. Organized agriculture and livestock existed. A complex civilization flourished for more than 16 centuries and disappeared before any other civilization that modern archaeology recognizes even began. The flood was not just water falling from the sky for 40 days. It was a complete planetary reset. Underground sources exploding, continents possibly moving, oceans forming where there was once dry land. Geological layers being deposited in weeks or months, not millions of years. The world that emerged from the waters was geologically, climatically, biologically different from the world that submerged. And somewhere, under kilometers of rock and sediment, deposited during the most violent cataclysm this planet has ever experienced, the remains of that civilization are still there. Crushed cities, corroded tools, mineralized bones, silent, inaccessible, waiting perhaps forever, or perhaps until someone finds the right layer in the right place with the right eyes to recognize what they are seeing. The world before the flood existed. The Bible affirms it. The details are few, but the implications are immense. A humanity with surprising technological capability, incomprehensible longevity, and moral depravity so deep that only total destruction could resolve it. 8 survivors carrying the torch of civilization through the waters of judgment. And we, their descendants, living in the rebuilt world, reading about the lost world, and perhaps wondering if the same seeds of destruction that flourished before the flood are flourishing again today.